Hi, I'm Dr. Chris Samuels. Most people think compulsive pornography use is about sexual desire. Too much of it, an inability to control it, a moral weakness, a bad habit, a character flaw. But after 30 years of treating people who struggle with this, I can tell you it is almost never primarily about sexual desire. Instead, it's about emotional pain that has nowhere else to go. The person who turns to pornography compulsively is not, in most cases, chasing pleasure. They're feeling something: stress, loneliness, anxiety, a feeling of emptiness or shame so familiar they may not even recognize it as a feeling anymore. The pornography works not because it feels good, well, of course it generally does, but because for a few minutes it makes everything else stop. Now, if pornography is just a bad habit, the solution is discipline. But if it's a coping strategy, if it's doing a job in a person's emotional life, then discipline alone will never be enough. You have to understand the job it is doing before you have a chance of replacing it with something that actually works. That's what we need to talk about here. If I were to ask my clients to describe the moment just before they turned to pornography, very few would say, I was feeling sexually aroused. What they describe is something entirely different. They were stressed about work. They just had a fight with their partner. They were bored and restless and just couldn't settle. They were lying in bed at night with their mind racing and a knot in their stomach. They felt lonely, even if they weren't alone. The pornography enters as an answer to that emotional state, not a sexual one. It provides an immediate neurochemically powerful shift in how the person feels. The stress recedes, the racing thoughts quiet, the loneliness is temporarily numbed. And that relief is what they're actually addicted to. This is why people return to pornography even when they don't want to, even when they feel disgusted with themselves. It's not the sexual content that pulls them back. It's the promise of emotional escape. Here's where it intensifies. Every time a person uses pornography to manage an uncomfortable emotion, two things happen at once. They get the relief they were seeking, and they miss an opportunity to actually feel the feeling, to sit with it and learn that it won't destroy them. Over time, the person's capacity to tolerate difficult emotions doesn't just stay flat, it withers. Stress that someone else might manage by calling a friend or going for a walk becomes for this person unbearable. Not because the stress is worse, but because they've trained their nervous system to expect immediate relief. And anything short of that feels like an emergency. And when willpower fails, which it will, here's what's happening. When a person views pornography, the brain releases a surge of dopamine, the same neurotransmitter involved in every addictive process. That dopamine creates anticipation of relief, which is why the craving, the urge, often starts before the person has made any conscious decision to act. The circuit fires automatically. The craving arrives before the thought does. This is why people describe feeling like they were on autopilot, like they found themselves in front of a screen without deciding to go there. The decision-making part of the brain is genuinely being bypassed. Just stop is not a treatment plan. You're working against a neurological circuit that has been reinforced hundreds or thousands of times. What does recovery actually require? If pornography is a coping strategy, then recovery requires building a different coping strategy. That means not just eliminating the behavior, but developing other ways to do the job the pornography was doing. There's a saying in 12-step recovery for sexual addiction that captures the whole mechanism in one sentence. When I feel, I don't act out. When I act out, I don't feel. Recovery begins when a person learns to reverse that equation. The first step, and this is both the simplest and the hardest part, is learning to recognize the emotional state that precedes the compulsion. Most people experience the craving as though it arrives out of nowhere, but it doesn't. There's always a feeling that was present before the craving appeared. Once you can say, I'm not craving pornography right now, I'm lonely, or I'm not aroused, I'm anxious. You've created a small but critical space between the emotion and the compulsion. And in that space, a different response over time becomes possible. If you or someone you love is struggling with this, I want to leave you with one thing. Compulsive pornography use is not a sign of moral weakness. It is not evidence that a person is fundamentally bad or broken. It's a coping strategy, a misguided, costly, self-reinforcing one that developed because the person didn't have or was never taught another way to manage what they feel. This is not an excuse. It's a diagnosis, and it points toward a very specific kind of help, not the kind that focuses only on stopping the behavior, but the kind that asks what the behavior was medicating and helps the person build a life where they no longer need it. Recovery doesn't come from trying harder. It comes from healing deeper. I wish you well.